Question 17 in the education section. This question reads, identify and explain one in-school factor which might account for the differences in educational achievement between ethnic groups shown in item C. Item C is pictured on the screen, as you can see here. We are looking at the percentage of pupils achieving GCSE grade 5 or above in English and maths by ethnicity in England in 2017. We can see that in the lead are Chinese students and furthest behind are Black Caribbean students. And this is in terms of the percentages of the number of pupils in percentages achieving grades 5 or above. And this comes from the Department of Education. So this is a fairly trustworthy source. This is a true reflection of what happened in England in 2017. So what we need to do using this item is examine a weakness of research using official statistics on the educational achievement of different ethnic groups. Bit of a tricky question because it's quite precise, although I was very happy with the knowledge that I saw demonstrated in this question. Some of you chose what I thought was probably a more complicated route through this question. There are easier answers that you could have given, and for some reason you all gave yourself a bit of a hard time, or the majority of you gave yourself a bit of a hard time by choosing labelling as your explanation. Absolutely is a correct answer. I just think it was a bit of a trickier one to try and use in a relatively low level question. So let's have a look at the mark scheme and see what other answers that we could have given. So the indicative content here would be the ethnocentric curriculum, which is the idea that what we learn in school tends to focus around white Anglo-Saxon culture. So history lessons tend to be very European centered. The languages we learn tend to be European, so French, Spanish, German. But also the fact is that, history does take place around the world, and there is Black history, there is Asian history. How much of that do we really know, and how much of it is taught in British schools? So that's what's meant by the ethnocentric curriculum. If I'm a student from a non-European background, I might find a bit of a disconnect between my engagement in the curriculum and how well I do, because perhaps it doesn't really speak to my experience. Or maybe there's certain disadvantages because some of the curriculum builds on itself. So if I were in a history lesson learning about, let's say, Tudor history, I might need to have some background knowledge of other monarchs and maybe even medieval history in order to fully understand that, which I might not have if I'm from another parts of the world and I've studied different history. So that's what's meant by ethnocentric curriculum. Teacher expectations and labelling, which I'll talk about in a moment, because that was the majority of you who answered this question, gave that response. And then language or linguistic differences, which was the second most common answer. Language and linguistic differences would be things such as if I'm a non-native English speaker or a person who speaks English as a second language. If I'm coming to a lesson and all of the lesson is in English, I'm having to do twice the amount of work as everybody else, because I'm having to translate and understand everything, as well as then try to understand what's going on in the lesson and try to learn that information. And again, I'm also encoding all of that into my memory using English. So there's quite a lot more cognitive strain on non-English speakers or non-native English speakers who are in those lessons, which kind of also ties back to the ethnocentric curriculum. So those are two answers that I just wanted to unpack first, but the most common answer I got was teacher expectations and labelling. Again, I thought that this was probably the most complicated one because you had to go into a little bit more detail because you'd have to explain Becker and what labelling was all about. So it was a little bit of a clunky, difficult one to give, but I was really impressed that most of you thought of that and used that in your answer. Now, if you've missed out on some marks because perhaps it wasn't as well developed an explanation, I think most of you did give a relevant factor, so it will be that it's not necessarily as developed. This is where I'd have a little look at the AO2 content. This second bullet point here refers to labelling and how it might apply to people of a different ethnic background. And then obviously the first bullet point here refers to, it's because it's in the same order as the list above. So this one here refers to the ethnocentric curriculum, and this one down here will refer to language and linguistic skills. So if you found that you have given the right answer, but for whatever reason you haven't got the full mark, have a little look at what's in this AO2 content and see how you might develop your answer just that little bit further.